Hello and welcome to the Design Solutions Translation Tessellation video. In this video, I'll be teaching you the techniques for creating your own translation type of tessellation. A translation type tessellation is unique in that the unit is repeated both horizontally and vertically. I'll be showing you some keyboard shortcuts along the way and some ways to creatively embellish your work. You can ask your teacher or professor for further details as needed. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this video. Alright, let's begin. What we're going to do is scroll down to the left hand corner where the Start menu is, and you're going to left click on the Start menu. Now in XP this button might say Start, but either one is a Start menu. Then we're going to hover over all programs and allow our next menu to pop up, and we'll scroll to the Accessories folder, left click on the Accessories folder, and we should find in there a Paint program, and that's the one we want, Windows Paint. So we're going to left click on that, and you'll notice it opened the full screen. Now some of my students have had a little bit of trouble, or it's not really trouble, but their screen will open something like this and they're not quite sure what to do. So I want to take a moment to show you exactly what you can do if your screen opens up small like this. Now again, I recommend, if you've seen the introductory videos to Introduction to Media Player and the Introduction to Paint, I go over this extensively. But for now, I'll just show you that there's a couple ways you can handle this. You can left click and drag to customize the size, or you can simply left click on this middle button, which is the maximize button, and it will actually maximize it to full screen. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Now, the second part is this white space. This is called the canvas, and these little blue buttons, not really buttons, these little blue points actually turn into arrows that you can left click and drag, and you'll notice you can drag it as far wide as you want. What I recommend is getting it as big as you can without losing sight of it. In other words, you still want to be able to see some gray space here at the bottom and some gray space on the right, but it should be quite large, perhaps a rectangle like the size of your paper, or perhaps your instructor has certain parameters, and if you want to specifically change the image size, you can go to Image, left click, and go to Attributes, and this will tell you the actual width and height in pixels or in centimeters or inches. So if your professor or your teacher has certain dimensions they want, this is where they would plug these in, okay, or this is where you would plug them in. And again, that's going to be up to the specific teacher. Now we do want to save our file, so what we're going to do is left click on File, and we're going to save it as. That will bring up this dialog box, and I'm going to save it in my Pictures folder, and I'm going to call this Translation Tessellation. It's good to get to know how to spell these big words because they are quite big words, quite large words. So it's good to know how to spell those. So Translation Tessellation. And we're going to left click here so it's not a JPEG. I want that to be a bitmap of some sort. Any of these bitmaps should work. I'm going to go with a 24-bit bitmap. And once I've done that, I'm going to click on Save. All right. Now at this point, we're going to go in and I'm going to select, I'm going to select the rectangle tool because all of these are going to start as a rectangle. All of these tessellations designs that we complete are going to start as a rectangle. Actually, it's going to be a square that we're going to use. And to do this, we're going to, first of all, actually I got ahead of myself a little bit. We're going to come up here and click on the line tool, and I'd like you to select the second line thickness for this second line thickness, And for XP users, this should be where it's located. For Vista, Windows users, Windows 7 users, you can actually see both sets here at once. But we're going to also need to select this first selection under the rectangle tool. There are three types of selections. This one is an outline only. This one is an outline and fill. And this one is a fill only. For this, since we're building the framework, we're going to want to make sure that we select outline only because we're building a framework. Now perhaps it's good at this point to show you how to set up the page for printing. So I'm going to have you go up here to File, Page Setup, and you'll notice that right now our page setup will only print half of this tessellation, so that's no good. Now I've had experience with students working on laptops where they're not connected to a network printer, and so this dialog won't even allow you to change anything. So if that's the case, you can skip this part, let your teacher know that you can't change any of these options, and they can work that out with you. But again, I've had instances where this is not available. So again, if it is available, you can set up the page by doing the following. First of all, I want you to click on Landscape so we get more of our image. And then secondly, we're going to click on Fit To, and I'm going to click 1 to 1. So 1 by 1. I want this whole thing to fit on a single page. And again, if your professor has different parameters, they can certainly fit those as well. Alright, so that's the page setup. So click on OK, and we should be ready to get started with this. Now again, we're going to start with a square, and the square should be approximately a quarter of the size of the page. In other words, a quarter of this height of this page. Alright, and so I'm going to hold the Shift key, left click, and drag out a square that's about a quarter of the size of the page. So I could fit approximately 4 or 5 of these squares from top to bottom along this page. Again, we don't want it too big because it will be more difficult to work with. So about a quarter is what I found is a good workable size. Alright, so that's all we're going to do with that square at this point. Now we're going to come up and choose the line tool. And I'd like you to pick, again, the third line thickness for this one. And what we're going to do is start at this top left corner, and we're going to drag into the shape. Now again, you can move this pretty much anywhere you'd want to, but for this design I'm going to have you stay pretty close. Somewhere over here is probably good. So if I drag in at about a 45-degree angle, anywhere is fine, then I let go. Okay, and that's pretty much what happens when you let go. And then we're going to left click again, and drag out. Again, this is going to be kind of random at first. When you're first creating these tessellations, they can appear a little bit random at first. Now you'll see this little point here. It looks like I've left a little space there. So what I'm going to do is get my magnifying glass and go examine that. So I'm going to click on that, and I'll see that yes, in fact, there's a little bit of a space there. And the problem with that is that when I go to paint this design, that space might allow paint to seep through. So I'm going to take and left click just to straighten and neat that up. I'm going to close that gap by drawing a line over that. Now if that didn't happen to yours, that's fine, but if there are any gaps along these lines, you need to clear them up before you begin. Either hit Control Z to undo, like I showed you in the introductory series, or simply go back and touch it up with the pen tool or the line tool. Alright, let's go back to the magnifying glass and bring it back out to 100%, and select the line tool again. Now this time we're going to select the curved line tool, And what we're going to do, I don't know if you've used the curved line tool. If you haven't, here's how it works. Watch this. You might want to try this a couple times. What you'll do is left click, and it works just like the line tool, except when you let go, you can actually left click again and drag this tool, or drag this line into a position that you want. And you can do that 2 times. So if I left click again, it actually modifies it, and I can create an S-curve. Now, unfortunately, if I left click again, it starts my next line. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo those two. But play around with that a little bit so you can get used to it if you need to, unless you're brave and want to just get started. Remember, you can always hit Control Z to undo if you don't like the line. So with this curve line tool, I'm going to drag into my shape somewhere down here. And then I'm going to left click to somewhat bend this up. I want to bend that up a little bit, almost make that look like a wing. And since that's where I want the line to stay, I'm going to left click again to lock it in place. Then I'm going to come down here and start my next line to the corner, to the top right corner, and then left click and drag and bend this line. And since again this is where I want it to stay, I'm actually going to left click again when I have that in place. And that looks pretty good. So at this point, what we need to do is bring this top section down to the bottom and bring this left section over to the right. So how are we going to do that? We're going to come up here and left click on the selection tool. And it's very important that you know the difference between these two. And again, if you haven't watched the introductory video, it's probably a good idea to watch it. This selection tool will actually select all the background. Let me just show that to you just so you know what not to do. This is what not to do. We don't want to select the background also because for obvious reasons we can't see the framework we're trying to build. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. But I do want to select the transparent selection. And what I'm going to do is select this top line that I drew, the line from this point in to this point. Make sure I have that entire line selected, and I'm going to hold the Control key and hit the letter C 1 time, which will copy it to my clipboard. Now if I hold the Control key and hit the letter V, watch what happens. I hit the letter V with the Control key held down, and it copies it onto my paper, onto my canvas. So I have an exact duplicate of this line segment right here. So again, I can left click and move that around. Now if something happens and you drop it and you click outside, you can't move it anymore. So what you'll have to do is reselect it using the transparent selection tool. Reselect that section, and that'll make it available for you to move around. So again, what we're going to do for a translation tessellation is drop this line down to the bottom of our shape and put it perfectly aligned with the corners, just like that. Then we're going to, with the selection tool still selected, we're going to do the same with this line segment, this first line segment that we drew. We're going to left click, drag, hit Control, or hold Control and hit C, hold Control and hit V 1 time, and that will give you an exact duplicate. Now another way you could do this is to go here while you have it selected, edit, copy, edit, paste, and that will do the same thing. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. I'm going to come back here and select what I've done. And what we're going to do is drag this across. Since this is a translation tessellation, we want them to fit side by side, both vertically and horizontally. I'm going to slide this piece directly across and try to fit it on perfectly. When I have it in place, I've got the start of a good tessellation model, or a good tessellation shape. So at this point, I'm going to select my magnifying glass, and I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit so that I can see this, and I'm going to then use my eraser tool to clean this up. Now you'll notice when I select my eraser tool, I have various sized erasers, and that's going to depend on your expertise with this, what size you use. Basically what we want to do is erase the lines that we don't need on our tessellation. So I'm going to try and show you how to do that. So I'll stick with this second size eraser. And what I'm going to do is left click and drag when I'm ready to erase. And I'm going to left click and drag, and this can be a little bit tricky. And remember what you can do. If you happen to make a mistake and cut into your shape, you can always hit Control Z to undo all the damage and start over again. So I hit Control Z twice on that to undo the damage. So keep that in mind as you proceed. So we're going to trim off the top, and we're going to trim off these pieces that we don't need. We're going to come inside the shape. We're going to trim out the original square, which we do not need any longer because we've created a new shape which should tessellate just like our square has done. So again, I left click and drag out. I recommend getting close to the shape, left clicking and dragging away from the shape. Something like this. Left click and drag. Left click and drag. Left click and drag. And over here, left click and drag away. And again, you may need to pick a different size eraser tool. It depends on how much success you're having trying to erase. And again, if you break through any of the lines of your template of this shape that we've created, if you break through any of the lines, you make sure you go back and check it and fill it in. Now it looks like right in here there might be a little bit of a gap. It's a little too close for me. So what I'm going to do is take my line tool while I'm still here in this mode, and I'm going to left click and redraw right over that to make sure that there are no places where my paint can escape, because when I paint this, I don't want my paint coming out into my other shapes. Alright, that looks pretty good. So at this point, it looks like we're ready. What we're going to do is to select the magnifying glass, bring it back out to 100%, and then we'll select the selection tool and make sure that its selection is on transparent selection. And now we're going to left click and get the whole shape there. And we're going to bring this first one right up into the corner because we want to make sure that we can paint all these areas correctly. We got to bring this into the exact corner. It may take a few tries, but make sure that you can get it where these points, this point, and this point are all moving you off the page. They should touch just like mine so that this becomes a shape and this area becomes a shape. You'll see why that's important when we paint this. Alright, now since my shape is still selected, I can hold the Control key and hit C, and then hold the Control key and hit V. Or another way to do that, as I said earlier, would be to go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste. Those will both do the same as this is done. Alright, now to see if this works, we need to bring this across, and we're going to translate this shape, which means to bring this across and fit it perfectly over here and perfectly down this way until the entire screen is filled. So starting here, I'm going to drag horizontally across until it's perfect. And again, take your time and do it right. Once it's in place, hold the Control key and hit V again, and that will give you another shape. Alright, and we're going to continue to do this. Control V until we've filled in this entire surface. Control V. Okay. Alright, now let's try it the other direction. So we're moving both horizontally, and we also need to do this vertically. So Control V. Let's bring it down and see if this is going to fit. Yep, it looks like it's going to fit perfectly right there. Control V again. And this shape should fit. If you've done this correctly, they should all fit perfectly together, just like that. Control V. Alright, we're going to take our time and we're going to fill this in. Control V. fitting them right in place. Control V. Control V, and I could start to build in each direction, both vertically and horizontally, making sure these shapes fit exactly. Uh-oh. Perfect. Control V. And I want to bring this down until my whole page is filled in. Control V. And then with this mouse, it's a little bit hard to get it perfect, but I just keep on working until it's filled in. Good. Control V. And you work your way across just like this. Control V, and we're going to fill up this last one, and we do have to bring it off the screen a little bit, so I'm going to actually have to back my mouse up a little bit. Good. Control V. And again, they should start fitting together just like pieces of a puzzle. Since they are translating, they should fit right together all the way across, both horizontally and vertically. Uh-oh. Alright, now this one must have gotten off a little bit. So, what I can do to fix that is bring in my magnifying glass and hit that 2 times. And simply grab the eraser tool, the smallest one, and take away some of that line that I don't need. Something like this. Alright, and let's back that out a little bit. And I'll hit Control V again. Alright, perhaps this is a good time to tell you about a few problems that might happen, might come up. For instance, if you notice on my screen, this little overlapping tessellation shape. What happened is I hit Control C and Control V to paste, and then I accidentally went off the screen and grabbed something. Or you might find that something like this happens to you and you actually can't reactivate this. So if I go and click my selection tool, there's no way to reactivate it. But not all is lost. Don't worry if something like this happens to you. I'm going to show you a quick fix. And again, since this happened to many of my students, I've had to come up with a fix for it, but it's not that difficult. Here's what I recommend doing. Make sure that your selection tool is selected and that you have the transparent option selected as well. And come in and just select that entire portion. Make sure you get everything that you want gone. Alright, and we're going to select that entire portion. And then we're going to hit delete. And that's going to take that section out. Now, again, we're just going to move over and we're going to find a good whole unit. One of these units that is intact. And it looks like I'm going to take this one right here. I'm going to select this unit, make sure I select the whole thing. one that is intact, and I'm going to select it. And now instead of hitting Control, I'm going to actually, instead of hit, yes, I'm going to hit Control C to copy, and then Control V to paste. And you'll notice it pastes it almost right exactly where I need it. So I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to put it right back where I needed it. Let's see, it's not exactly where I needed it. That's pretty close though. And I may need to do some patching up over here, but if I do need to do that, I'll fix that later. Now you'll see it's still broken over here, so I'm going to hit Control V again. That's Control V as in the letter as in the word vampire, and I'm going to drag this down and fit it right into place again. That should fit right into place. And if it doesn't for some reason, what I can do is, that looks pretty good there. There's still a little bit of overlapping here, but what I can do is then come back in with my eraser tool and get rid of the parts that I don't want. So if I zoom in, I can actually take that eraser tool and get rid of some of this, clean this up on a little bit. Probably go down to a smaller eraser tool, just kind of clean this up a little bit. Yeah, just like that. Alright. So that's a way that it's not preferred, but if you do make a mistake, as we often do, at least you'll know that there's a way out. Now the first way out would be to hit Control Z and undo your mistake, obviously, but if you make a mistake that you can't just readily undo, there's another option for you. And along those lines, let me just show you a quick way to do something very similar. Alright, if I go up and select the selection tool, and let's see, I'm going to select a few of these because I want to fill this in a lot faster. I want to get this filled in, so I'm going to select these 6. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to select those 6, hit Control C to copy to the clipboard, Control V to paste, and now I can move around 6 at a time, 6 sections at a time, which will make this go a little bit quicker, which is desirable at this point. So Control V gives me another copy of those. Again, I can bring those down, place those in place, and then I can just come back and clean up anything I need to clean up. Control V gives me a copy of 6 again, and I can move along a little bit faster this way. There it is, Control V. Place this one right in here. It's a little tricky. There we go. And I'm going to do that, Control V, one more time because it looks like I didn't quite finish down here. Alright, that should do it. Now you can see I've got some double lines over here and some double lines down here. I'm going to come in and clean that up real quick before I go on. So I'm going to take my magnifying glass and then my eraser tool, select the first one, and I'm going to clean that up just a little bit. The most important thing is to make sure that you don't have any gaps. Oh, I just made a gap there. But I'm going to show you how to fix that here in a second. So those gaps can actually be fixed with this curve line tool. Select the third line thickness, and what I'm going to do is start right here, left click and drag right off the page. Alright, I'm going to close this little widget. Alright, so I can fix that up, and I can do the same thing here. Oops, Control Z to undo that. That gave me the wrong line. So hit the line tool, left click and drag, and then remember you can curve that up, and then left click again just to stop that from happening again. Now here at the bottom, I guess I'm all the way down as far as I can go at this point, but I'm going to clean up this one as well. So I'm going to select the eraser tool, and I'll come in, left click and drag to the right. Try to get in and erase all that I can here. Alright, and then hit my line tool, curve line tool, left click and drag. And I'm going to bring it right to here. Then I'm going to come over and drag up and left click again. Make sure you do that twice so that it won't continue to draw lines. And I'm going to take my straight line tool at this point so I can fill in some of these areas. So left click and drag, left click and drag. Alright, now that should do it. Here we go. Left click and drag. Fill in some of these. This is a gap. This is an important one to fill in here because that type of gap will actually make it hard to paint. What'll happen if you have a gap inside of these? Let me just show you that while we're here. If there's a gap, if I erase this, if there's a gap in between these, and I'm going into paint, so if I left click here and left click on blue, what'll happen is if it's solid, the paint will stay within the solid shape. However, if there's a gap anywhere in your shape and you left click, the gap will allow the paint to flow through. So I'm going to hit Control Z and go back and get my line tool. So you have to really inspect, left click, Control Z. You have to really go in and inspect each of these tessellating shapes to make sure there's no gaps. Alright, and I'm going to change this one back to white by right clicking on it, because this is your left click color. If you look at your color palette, this is your left click color, this is your right click color, and I'm going to show you how that works in a few moments. Alright, so now I'm going to zoom back out. After I've cleaned that up, that looks like a pretty good tessellation. Alright. Now, for creative embellishment, I've seen all kinds of creative embellishments. I'm going to show you just a couple. I don't want to show you a bunch because that would take away the creativity from it, but I'm just going to show you a few ways that we can do this. And we're going to eventually, I'll show you how to alternate the color pattern because that's one of the requirements, at least in the video series. You know, if your professor has a different way they want you to color this, then that is perfectly fine. What I'm stressing the alternating pattern, but you certainly don't have to. At this point, I want to show you a few ways to creatively embellish, and we're going to start out by using this ellipse tool. So I'm going to left click on the ellipse tool. Now again, if you're in XP, you probably have to go up to the line tool and grab the second line thickness, and then hit the ellipse tool. And what we're going to grab is still the framework tool, or I call it the framework option, but it's basically the stroke only. This one here, where there's a stroke and a fill option, this one is just a fill option, but we're going to grab the stroke only option, and we're going to go in, and I'm just going to hold the shift key now, left click and drag, and I can actually drag out a circle of any size. Okay, so if that's my circle and I wanted to repeat that, I could do that by simply selecting it. Well, let's do something before I do that. Let me get my airbrush tool, and I'll pick the first size, and I'm going to go in there. I'm going to spray an eyeball. I'm going to have him looking backwards a little bit. I'm going to have him looking back here, just like that. So he's kind of looking back, and I'll take my curve line tool and click, undo, Control Z, click and drag. He looks like he's frowning a little bit, so I'm going to now left click again, sort of drag that up so he's not so much frowning anymore, and left click again. Now this may take a little bit of practice, but I'm sure you'll be able to do it once you get the hang of it. And then I'm going to select, and I'll probably use the freeform selection on this just so I don't grab his head as well. So let me zoom in a little bit, maybe 2 times. Grab this freeform selection tool and make sure that the transparent option is selected, and we're just going to, Yeah, I'm going to circle right around this and right back. And that selects that part. So I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V. And what that does, it gives me an identical eyeball. So I could actually put it down here if I wanted to make this thing into some kind of double-eyed creature, or I can simply move these around. So Control, since it's on the clipboard, I can actually back out of this by grabbing my magnifying glass. Okay, so that's just a creative little eyeball trick you can do. Control V to paste, and you can put some eyeballs on these guys. Control V to paste, and I'll put a few down. Now let's skip a row. Maybe for the other one, we'll put a different set of eyes. And I'm not going to do the whole thing for you right now. I'll put this up online so you can actually see it, or maybe your teacher has a copy of this they'll let you look at. Alright, now let's come up with another eyeball. So come back and select the circle or the oval tool, the ellipse tool, and this time let's just drag without holding the shift key. Give this more of a long eye, and maybe have him looking forward, something like that. And maybe for the eyebrow, we will drag here, and then something like that. How's that look? And then left click again, solidify that. And again, go up to your magnifying glass, get right in on that so you don't hit the sides. Freeform select. I'm going to come around. Got to be careful not to grab too much with these things. There we go. And I'm going to let go. And hit Control C to copy to the clipboard. And at this point, I'll zoom back out to 100%. So if I hit Control V, I'm going to get that same eyeball for this one. So I could do this row, something like this. Control V. I mean, you could do a lot of things. You could actually put it on here like this, kind of make it kooky looking. Alright, but it's up to you again. And you'll want to ask your professor what they're looking for. So that's a creative embellishment. Another thing you could do is simply add some curved lines. Perhaps we want to make this look like a bird or something. So I drag out a line and then curve it up. Drag out another line. Oops. Remember, you got to hit that twice. Perhaps I put a few straight lines in here for some tail feathers. Again, whatever you want to do for this is fine. Alright, so maybe that's what you do for these. Creative embellishments. I don't know, maybe add some other things. I don't want to give you too much. You guys can, I'm sure, come up with better things than I've come up with here in a few minutes. I know that because I've taught this for many years and I've seen students come up with some intricate designs. And sometimes the less I show them, the more creative they get. Drag, second time, click, drag, second time, and click. Oops, Control Z. Alright, so there's some creative embellishments, and again, you could do all kinds of things. Play around with it, have a little bit of fun. Let's go ahead in now and add some coloring effects. And again, if you remember, up here we have, right now it's a foreground color is black, background color is white. We can change that by left-clicking to change the foreground color and right-clicking on any of these colors to change the background color. And since I'm going to be alternating a pattern here, I'm going to left-click on red, and I'll right-click on an analogous color, something like this. Right-click on purple. See if that's enough. And again, I'm going to click on the paint bucket to fill in. So if I left-click, yes, turns them red. I right-click turns them purple. Left click. And you can also go, since it's a translation tessellation, it translates across horizontally and vertically. So we'll rotate, or we will alternate our colors the same way. So I'm going to right click down, left click, right click. So again, left click, right click, left click, left click, right click, left click, oops, right click, left click, right click, left click. And you can continue this all the way down. You can already start to see what this is going to look like. So if I go back in and I fill this in with an alternating pattern, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, all the way down. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. You can see how quick this goes, and there's one of those gaps that we were looking for. So Control Z to undo that immediately as it happens. Grab your line tool, third line thickness, and go patch up that little area. Grab that line and bring it, oops, Control Z, that was red. So I have to left click on black, drag that across so that that gap no longer exists, and then go back and right click or left click on the red. And let's try this again. Select the paint bucket tool, left click, right click, there it goes. Seems to work now. So again, you can take this and use it. You can upload these to the bulletin board. That would be great. We'd love to see your work, and you can check out some of the other student work that's on there, and I think you'll enjoy it. Uh-oh, what happened here? Oh, at this point I gotta right click, left click, right click, left click, right click, left click, right click twice, left click twice. Had to undo that, so you got to be careful. I got talking and made a mistake. Uh-oh. Now here's one. This will happen most frequently. My students will come to me, Mr. Schneider, I can't fix this. Here's what you have to do. If you hit the line, I'll show you what I did. Let me undo that first. Control Z. Let's zoom in and I'll show you exactly what I did. Down here, I was trying to color this little area inside of here. And instead of going back like I should have and erased it, I tried to color it. So notice what happens when I hit inside here. I left click and it turned everything that was black red, and that included my entire framework. So if you do this, don't try to fix it with coloring effects. Immediately hit Control Z to undo it. Don't try, I cannot stress this enough, don't try to go in and fix that. What I should have done here is taken my eraser tool and Control Z, my eraser tool, and turn this black, right click white, and erased what I didn't want, and then paint tool, left click, right click, then go back and fill it in that way. That's the appropriate way to do it. I'm going to zoom back out, but again, what I did is I ended up painting one of my strokes, which happens to be black. And so what happened is everything that was attached to it, which is the whole framework, turned black. Alright, so again, hopefully if you make that mistake, now I've told you how to fix it, and that should be helpful for you. Okay, so that's what it looks like, and again, you can finish these up, and we'd love to see them uploaded, some of your creative embellishments up to the website, up to the bulletin board, and I hope you've learned a lot from this. That's a translation tessellation tutorial. Have a great day.